There we are. Wait, I'm still. Oh, this is somebody else's video. Okay, I'm catching on slowly. Sure. Well, they still appear over here. Well, I've been like at Cisco WebEx meetings where people are like falling asleep, watching other things. They don't know their camera's on. Oh, sure. There's a lot of time people have the camera on, they don't know. And meetings are usually utterly boring and pointless. You spend the whole time waiting in case they care about your topic, and they don't. And so, but you have to be there just in case they care about your topic, and it's sort of degrading. It sort of reminds you how unimportant you are. It's not pleasant. Anyway, so anyway, our big news, of course, is we won another competition. We won 2 competitions in the last week. And I should use especially with things like that. All right. So anyway, and here comes a chat message. Congratulations on winning. That's right. Yes, thank you. And that's the issue. This one, it is interesting. The larger accomplishment, in my opinion, is this one. This is the national #1 cybersecurity competition in the world, Western CCDC. The Western Regional is the regional one here, and we've never made it this far before. We made it to the qualifier. I often tell people about my black badge at DEF CON. I am not the best of the best. I am the worst of the best. And so we are the worst of the best. We barely made it from not qualifying to qualifying to compete in the regional. And this puts us on the page with Stanford and Berkeley and Davis and not another 2-year colleges there. So this is a big accomplishment for us. But that's right. So I think this is a real big accomplishment, but I suppose understandably, the higher ups don't see it that way. They hardly notice this. They can't understand this. I mean, so we're on a list, number 8. Who cares about number 8? What good is that? I say, well, we used to be down number 20. This is better. But anyway, that's not what gets people excited. What gets them excited is this one. That's a new for-profit school in Arizona, and they're hot. So I know, I never heard. They're new, and they're obviously doing a good job training a cybersecurity team. Or else they're figuring out how to cheat, or one of those things. Probably just, I assume, probably learning their cybersecurity. It is kind of the same thing in this business, yeah. And this particular competition is very hard to win. The scoring is very strange. It's pretty frustrating, yeah.
How many people on the team?
I think 8. Yeah, and so this one here is a local competition that we just did last weekend, like 2 days ago, and we won first place in this one. So there's the team. And then they gave us this trophy. And I have no idea how much this matters. They're taking this trophy to the chancellor. Chancellor already offered to increase the funding for our department. It's going to the dean. This is like college people are incredibly impressed by this shiny gold thing. I know, it's a business guy with a suitcase. And they managed to get this little neck wearing thing to attach to it too by social engineering. Anyway, this really matters. This physical object is worth more than all the intellectual accomplishment. This really matters. So there's a lesson there about social engineering. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, the trophy is in plastic. It's not metal, but they covered it with fake gold. But anyway, it's off being the
finest ABS.
The what?
The finest ABS.
The finest AVX.
ABS. It's the common plastic.
Okay, fair enough. Can you clarify if quiz 6 is due today or next Monday? All right, let me find out what's going on. Should be on my website. Let me pull this up to what class? 129S. Schedule today is February 26. Wait, February 25. So quiz 6 is due next week. Quiz 5 is due this week. And what was this? Website says next Monday. Oh, Canvas says today. Oh, well, then I got to fix that. Okay, thanks. I'll check that. The website is what's right. If Canvas says something else, then I'm wrong. I'll have to fix the Canvas. Thanks for telling me. All right. I wish the two were synchronized, but I haven't got that working yet. I'm slightly less clumsy with Canvas than I used to be, but still pretty clumsy. All right. So anyway, that's our exciting news, and I think we should get down to the chapter. Last time, we did not finish the previous chapter of chapter 4. So that's the first thing, is the last section of this. And I was talking to a student just before class. I just want to remind you, when you first hear this stuff, it is overwhelming. There are really like 12 or 20 common technologies used to make every web page you look at. And each one of them has their own language and their own protocol and variable names. And it seems like far too much information at first. But if you just don't panic, you get used to it. At first, it seems like there's just an endless array of complexity. And in fact, there are really only like 3 or 4 families of products and then 3 or 4 sub-products, and you kind of get used to it. I think the same thing happens if you study human languages. At first, you say this is insane, and then you learn there's like the European ones and the Asian ones, and you can sort them into categories and kind of make some sense out of it. What first looks like madness, it is possible after you get over the initial shock to begin to get the, and so you really only learn the details of 1 or 2, and then you have pretty much an idea by comparing them how the others work. So if you connect to a server, we did this before with an SSH server, you send it a SYN/ACK, and many servers will now hand a banner telling you what they are. This is an Apache server, and it tells you what version of various products it's using. This is usually the way they design it by default, because the people who write the software think about it is super important to them when we go from version 2.40 to version 2.41. They'll trumpet it to a blog post. Nobody else cares, but they care. So for them, it's like super important to put right here Apache 1.3.31, because that means something to them. Nobody else cares. They could just as well put Apache there, but the developers care. So their idea of the correct thing to put there by default is always something like this, all full of technical information. Yeah. Yes, that's the problem. The attackers also care. So it'd be much more secure to remove all these version numbers. Anyway, so that's the game. Yeah.
And whenever an application, a client application needs to know that information, it's exchanged in some way, or they don't?
No, as far as I know, there's no case in which you would actually, you could in principle write a web browser that serves a different page to Apache 1.3 or interprets the Apache 1.3 page one way and the Apache 1.4 page another way, but there are standards. You should not have to do that. The only thing anybody cares about is the HTTP user agent, and the only thing they care about there is whether it's a cell phone or not. Because if it's a cell phone, you want to show the smaller page. In principle, you could decide whether you're talking to the IE browser or the Firefox browser and hand out a different page, although I don't know anybody that ever did that. Because that's one possible way the web could have evolved, but that would have been even crazier than it is. The way it actually evolved is people started obeying the standards. So you can make your page that pretty much works the same in every browser. That is what most people do. No, as far as I know, there is no reason to publish this. It's just a tradition for the people that develop software to put all this information in the header, which is probably convenient for people who are trying to make sure I have the new version on all my boxes. But it should only be used during deployment and then turned off later. But anyway, so you can run many tools, by the way, to fingerprint a server. Even if you turn off the information about the version, many tools will figure it out by just sending queries and looking at the details of the response and then looking at a index of what responses you get, like Nmap will do it. This HTTP fingerprinting tool will do it. And Wapalizer is my favorite. This is a modern one that goes in Firefox and I think Chrome also. And what it does is it gives you this little icon here, which somewhere I had a Wapalizer button. Let's go to another page. I just checked it before class because I had so much trouble finding it. And now, again, I can't find it. I don't know what pocket junk is. Let's try. There, it's finally showed up. This button tells you that we are using Apache, Bootstrap, Google Tag Manager, and so on. This and Slick, whatever that is, and jQuery, that will analyze whatever page you're at and tell you what technologies are used there. And it will try to figure out what version you're using and such. And you find a lot of things here, like if you look at, say, CNN.com, see what they're using. Probably going to be a big commercial framework. Varnish for caching, Optimizely for this, Usabilla, all these things. And the other one I know is the US Department of Defense. Let's take a look at that. DOD.gov, I think. Maybe DOD.US or something, probably US. All right, let's see, Google, DOD, what is it? They had a bug bounty. Okay, it's defense.gov, fine. Let's see what they're using. And that's what I thought. I learned about this. They're using .NET Nuke, which is a Windows-based platform, which is like the Windows alternative for WordPress, as if WordPress is not insecure enough, you could put it all on Windows and .NET, which is even crazier. I couldn't believe it when I said, no, you got to be joking. Nobody actually uses .NET Nuke. Well, the U.S. military does. So when they had the bug bounty, they had a bug bounty for part of the military. I was trying to learn enough .NET Nuke to find the bugs. And I didn't find them, but other people did. They made, I think, $100,000 finding all the bugs because Windows servers. Anyway, military loves Windows. Anyway, so you can see what everybody's using there, and I suppose there's probably some way to conceal it from this, but it's not easy because there are names of variables in your page and there's a formatting issue. And so, you can find out basically what people are using that way. And each one of them has known vulnerabilities. So you can attack things now that you know what they are. Yeah. 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 So, yeah, you just put on this extension, and it will then take the source code of the web page and compare it to a list of libraries looking for certain tags. Like WordPress will have a certain tag, and Joomla will have a tag. That's all it's doing. And that's what Nmap does too. Nmap sends packets to the page and takes the packets back and tries to go look through a list of signatures to see what kind of technology creates that. Now, although Nmap runs at a lower level, Nmap just sends individual packets, and it will tell you things like what the operating system is. This will tell you what the web server is. So two different. This is like layer 7, and Nmap is like layer 2 and 3.
So the web page is not kind of high information than
here. You might be able to hide the information. One thing you could do is you could just write your web page without the help of any tools. Like I just wrote this page in Notepad, just raw HTML. So there is no structure to find. So let's see what it makes of that. Yeah, all it can find here is I'm using Apache on Ubuntu. That's all you can say. If you just write your web page as plain text, then there is no JavaScript library or content management system or anything. But of course, you can only write very simple pages that way. Because it's in the banner. It's right there in the and by the way, if I put if I go to like Amazon must be using what's that? No, I don't think it would show in the source, but it'll show, I think, in the HTTP headers, in fact. And so if you go to Amazon, they must be using something awesome, probably their own proprietary content management. That's Pocket. Where is it? It's gone. That's what that thing seems. Oh, there it is. There, miscellaneous. HTTP2, Amazon Web Services, Amazon CloudFront. Right. So all you're finding out is they're using the Amazon services, of course. Anyway, I saw a chat message come in. And let's see what they're saying. Oh, is there a way to know which firewall they are using? Not as far as I know from Wappalizer, but the way you identify firewalls and web application firewalls is you send attacks. Like one thing I saw Joe McRae do a couple of years ago at a conference is he would send directory traversal attacks. So here's a simple directory traversal attack. If this was 1996 and I was talking to IIS like 2 on Windows NT 3.51, I could do this, // Windows system 32 cmd.com. I could just give it a path to go from the website up to the command prompt, hit enter, and it would give me a command prompt here, and I could just type commands and run them on the server. That's how easy it was to hack into Windows servers in like 1996. Yes. Now, you can't do that anymore. Like Joe McRae said, he said, directory traversal hasn't worked since Jesus walked the earth. But so you don't do it because you think it's going to work. You do it because you'll often get an error message, which is different for the different web application firewalls. And you can tell what their defense technology is by just knowing. This one, I got Amazon's customary message. But if I was to try this, I think against the City College server, let's see if ours is dumb enough to fall for it. It might be // Windows system 32 cmd.exe. And so I got this. This is a customary page, but sometimes you'll see a page which tells you the brand of the firewall or something. And that's one trick to do. Send some kind of attack and see what error messages you get. That's one way to fingerprint the protection technology in use. All right. So there, if you just look at the file extension of your page, this gives you a pretty good idea what's going on, of course. So let's see if I can get this thing to stop messing up on me and just get big. Shift Control P. Oh, come on. I always forget which stupid. Okay. There's 4 shift keys on the Mac, and I'm often reduced to a 32-choice brute force to remember how to do anything. So ASP is the Microsoft technology, active server pages. Java is now Oracle. making this one. Cold Fusion is Macromedia, and PHP is open source. You know, many people write these different. You can do a web page in any of these things, but you typically pick one technology and you get developers that are trained in that technology and you build everything on it. They all do about the same thing. They all have their own flaws and vulnerabilities. And typically, small companies start with open source stuff like PHP because it's free. But the problem with it is it doesn't really scale to the big time. When you get to the big time and you have 1,000 locations and 100 web servers based across 20 different firms, then you got to use the big stuff like Microsoft or Java, which is much harder to use, but it scales up to the big time much better. So you get a customized error page. If you go to a page with ASPX, you'll see something like this. You can spot these. The ASPX pages always look like this with this red font and stuff. So you know they're using Microsoft web servers. If you see that error, here's a generic error page that you get if you just give it an unexpected file extension and it doesn't even know it's an ASP page. Then you'll just just the browser giving you a generic page. So if you go on a Microsoft web server, the different file extensions map to different DILs, which are libraries used to process them, and you get different error messages as you hit different DILs. So here's an open text error message. You can tell open text because it has this weird mess with extra commas in the URL. Everybody has these, like I say, the fundamental problem with the web is there isn't much in the way of standards. So people just take the same information and repackage it in bizarre different ways. So these guys chose to put a bunch of commas in the URL, which is kind of nuts, but that's how they did it. Java is servlets. Oracle has these PLS things, PL SQL Gateway, and all these other things like Ruby on Rails that have special names. They have cookies they use to identify your session. PHP uses PHP session ID. Java uses J session ID. Microsoft uses ASP session ID. You know, and after you get used to it, you spot these names and you know what kind of technology you're talking to. Then everybody, you know, in order to save time and money, people don't write shopping carts. They just get one of the standard shopping cart frameworks and everything else. You just piece together components. Just like if you're building a car, you don't go smelt some iron. You go to the store and buy like a components and just put them together. That's how you build websites. So here's the typical thing you do. Find all the places where user input comes in. Web forms, query string parameters, cookies. Look for the format, and there should be some kind of name-value pair, and then see what you can feed in. Once you've found them, look at the banner, look for other software identifiers, run fingerprint software so you find out what versions of things are out there. And then various tools can do it. This HTTP print seems to be out of date, but these days there's Nmap, Netcraft, and Shodan are tools that will tell you what's being used on many servers. Then identify these technologies, and then just start Googling them to find out what vulnerabilities are known. That's what I did when I was doing the DoD bug bounty. I found out for .NET Nuke, I looked for known .NET Nuke exploits. And in fact, the only one that I found was a couple of years old and it was patched, and I was sort of out of tricks by then. Other people knew more tricks and they got in. You'll see things like JSP for Java server pages. Here's one, as you see, it's got a Java server page, then it's got name equals new, application is expired, start date is a date, end date is a date, order by name. Now, order by is very suggestive. Order by is a SQL command. So this strongly suggests that some of this stuff is going directly into SQL. So you might very well find SQL vulnerabilities by adding apostrophes to this. And so here's one with ASPX. And it's got a template that looks like a file name. Template equals new branch.tpl. So that looks like I'm going to find directory traversal or file inclusion because I've got a file name here. So I might be able to put .. some other file name here and do something with a different file. This is a fairly common, this is called local file inclusion. When you have a file name somewhere in the URL and you can change it to point to some other file. So just things worth trying. There's an edit parameter that's false. So maybe if it was changed to true, something interesting would happen, like I'd become the administrator and be able to change things. You know, that's all it is. Just like little kids, pull this, poke this, bang, bang, bang. Is there a way in? That's all you're doing. Here's a post request up to a page called feedback. So it's got 389 bytes of data starting here from equals user. This is a typical email layout from to account subject and so help. So this means I might be able to send spam with this. If I can just put the email information here, then maybe I can send it to another person with a forged from address, and I can use this to send out spam emails and that sort of thing. I may be able to put 2 emails in the same line, in the same request. That's a fundamental problem we'll see over and over again. You have multiple layers of processing. So the first one looks at the header, sees what the right number of bytes there, says it's done, hands it to the second layer. The second layer finds 2 emails there, but it doesn't know there was supposed to be only 1. So you can get away with stuff. The second one goes through without ever passing through whatever checks were. There's many cases where that works. It's just a matter, the same thing would happen with humans. I just open the envelope. I just read the top line. I read the body, and I no longer know what the envelope looked like. So they cannot see something that would be suspicious if someone looked at the whole story. So here you're going to identify the server-side functionality again. Here's EIS pub media/view. That is probably the same as this, schema equals pub, type equals media. This is that system where you use what looks like directory names to indicate parameter names. RESTful, that's it, RESTful, yeah. And so here's, one other thing that's common is code is reused. This got Amazon and Facebook and many other companies. They have some system that pumps out a sort of random number, which they then use for like 2 different purposes in different places by different designers. So one of them used that random number to put like a tag on images, and someone else used the same random number for the password reset tag. It gets emailed to you. And so you can look at somebody's page, look at the source code of the image, and then figure out how to reset their password. This tends to happen. And people that use encryption will use the same encryption module elsewhere. So you might be able to find some place where something unimportant is encrypted, and you can use it to deduce how the important thing is encrypted. A similar thing I'm doing now, there's an application I found on iOS that doesn't use HTTPS, but they do encrypt the password. And I can't see the source code. But what I can usually do is go to their Android app where I can see the source code, and they're probably doing the same thing. So now I can find out how it works. It's a similar issue. Anyway, if app obfuscates data, like I say, or encrypts data, then just try to find some other area, like an error message or feedback form or something where you get to put in the data and it encrypts it. And then you can put in data until you match their encrypted stuff or deduce the algorithm, try simple things. So I did this with Stitcher. It doesn't work with the modern version of Stitcher as easily, but in Stitcher you can just try short passwords and see that there's a pattern in the output and quickly figure out how it works. Yeah.
Just to reinforce what you said before.
Yeah.
Android, like when I was doing app development.
Yeah.
I'm not saying this is right and I know better now.
Yeah.
Literally, we spent 80% on the iOS version and 20% on the Android version.
Yes, I'm sure that, I imagine that explains.
Just my focus, the team's focus.
Well, you know, and well, in case people can't hear me saying you spend 80% of the time writing the iOS version and then throw the Android version out quickly. And that might be correct if your customers are mostly iOS or if that's what really matters. I mean, these are sensible business decisions, perhaps. And the role of a security engineer is not to like be a Dr. No, where you just say, no, stop doing everything you're doing because it's wrong. That's not helpful. Just like, you know, parents that criticize every little thing you do are not helpful. What you have to do is help them figure out which of their sloppy practices are the most dangerous and worth fixing, and which ones you can sort of cover over and keep doing, because you can't tell everyone to be perfect all the time. You can never make any money that way. You have to find, yeah, I mean, one possibility would be to just have an iOS version only, or, there's, maybe you could have some kind of overarching security, like change your web server to HTTPS only. So it covers a multitude of sins. But that's why you want a trained security expert to help you. How do I improve this ridiculous situation? Don't tell me to do everything perfectly because I'll go broke. Tell me something I can reasonably do that will make it better. And that takes judgment. So some errors give you a lot of information. Here's what I got. Like Walmart, one time I just put an apostrophe or quote at the end, and I got this whole page handing out source code and a stack trace right there. Doesn't work anymore. But this is fairly common that people haven't thought it through. And of course, this is a whole bunch of information that I should not have. Only the developer should get this much information, not the customer. So look for anything your app does. Look for things that were obviously bolted on later or forgotten from an earlier version. That's why usually you don't find vulnerabilities right in the main functionality, like the main login and the main shopping. You find them in things people don't use much, like the search for another user section or something, debug functions and so on. So that's the attack surface. Try and find out if they're validating parameters on the client side instead of the server side. Things like SQL injection, path traversal, and redirections are helpful, where one page on their site goes to another page on their site, and you can see the URL. You can often use that to steal cookies because you can craft requests that will go to their page and then come to your page. And that's unvalidated redirect. The social networking features sometimes are useful to make cross-site scripting. Login, we talk about quite a lot here. There's login errors like using unencrypted transmission. And there's ways that you lose track of the session. You got horizontal privilege escalation is moving from one user to another user. Vertical is moving from one user up to administrator. And they're both important. User impersonation is another way. And when they go off-site, remember that the referrer link will publish the URL of where they came from. So if you're putting sensitive data in the URL, this is one of the many reasons why you should not be doing that, because they advertise that to the next site they go to. And I say error messages leak information. Third-party components often have known vulnerabilities. This is supply chain problems. This is getting huge these days. If you write something in something like Python, people are installing libraries, and those are using other libraries. You're actually using something like 100 libraries going back 10 years from people you never heard of, and any of those could have problems that you didn't think about. And it would be a whole lot nicer to think all my stuff was written by my staff and went through my quality control, and that is so not true. So it's a problem. So here's an example. Auth here contains authentication functions. Where is it? Here, auth. Well, I'm not seeing the core. Oh, there's auth, forgot password and such. Okay, so this is a place you can go to see if there's a way to bypass the login or a reset password or something. Core site stats is here, and here you see page ID and stuff. So you've got all parameters to vary here. Like this looks like a path /home. You might be able to point that to a more interesting place. You might be able to put in wildcards. /home is here. That's probably authenticated user content. Linux servers typically have /home/username as the home for every user. So you might be able to find a user account you can get in there, and you might be able to find the names of all the users by looking at the content there, and then you know how to attack them. Icons and images are down here. Those are going to be static content used on pages, so probably nothing interesting, right? Just going to be the appearance. Pub is going to be RESTful resources under pub media user. Since there's a numerical value here, you might just try different numbers and see if you get to other people's stuff. Shop is here. This is all your online shopping with your books and everything. So you just look to see if you find logical errors, which we'll talk about more as we go ahead there, like running pages out of order. And that's how it goes. And that's, like I say, it's just a lot of lore. And it just takes practice to get good at doing this. Anyway, let's take a look at the Cahoots for that. If I can spell Kahoot. Here we go. And that is 4D, I think. Yeah. All right. Let's see how this looks. All right. I think they've improved the percussion. They put an echo on the wood block.
There's somebody who their sole job is to think about it.
What's that?
I'm sure there's someone whose
Oh, yeah.
sole job is to call someone.
There was a blog written by a guy who worked at Microsoft, and for an entire year, he worked on the shutdown button where you click Start Shutdown, and it says Shut Down, Hibernate, restart. He had to make that button over and over again every month for like a whole year as everyone kept changing, have 5 items, have 4 items, put them in a different order. He finally quit. He said, I can't stand this job anymore. You know, every little detail, some team of geniuses is spending 10,000 hours working on it. Anyway, all right, I guess I'll give 5 more seconds. All right. I'm sure the same thing's true of like every little detail in your car. Anyway, so what browser extension identifies the web server technologies? Okay, that's Wappalizer. All right, what file extension would you find on a LAMP server? Okay, LAMP is Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. So PHP is what you'll see there. All right, what directory name will you find on an Oracle server? Okay, PLS is an Oracle name. By the way, Oracle is something that you typically don't see until you get into a big corporation. So most of us that come from like small colleges and stuff, have never really seen it. But it costs like $1 million. All the big companies use it. It's very confusing to use. Yeah.
My neighbor is one of the heads of Oracle.
Yeah.
And she has a giant robotic naked robot in the lawn with a metal penis. It's amazing.
Well, that's great. Well, there you go. Yeah, see, they have luxuries like that. And Mark Shuttleworth went to the moon, and Elon Musk has flamethrowers, and he's in big trouble again. He tweeted the share price again after he had a consent decree promising he would stop telling lies about the share price. So Oracle, his stock price fell by 5%, and he's in big trouble. It's like Trump. The lawyers tell him shut up, and then he just doesn't shut up. And what'll happen if I just say it? Well, if you were Trump, you might get away with it, but Elon Musk is not getting away with it. Anyway.
The SEC found it in contempt.
Yes. You can't be the CEO of a company and lie about the share price. Yeah. What about this is too hard for him to get, but he can't get it. Anyway, so which one tells you you're on Microsoft software? I think the problem is these rich people are like kings. They just think they can do anything anytime they want. They don't expect to have to think twice before talking. But yeah, they own the whole world, but it's not quite that way. All right, so.
The mentality it takes to become wealthy and think that you deserve millions of dollars over.
It probably does. This is kind of what the Revolutionary War people went through. It's a big deal out of saying America was not going to be like that. This is CNIT 129S.
How does this work again? Is this extra credit points for?
Yeah, you get extra credit if you're in the top 3. You get 3 points.
And you have to just, I probably should not have to Jason.
You're Jay? Good. Okay, what's your name?
John.
John. And John Groves?
Rollins.
Okay. R, right? R will do. Okay. Good. Yes. And MHIN. There, that'll do. Good. It's easier for my grader when we can tell who the people are. Okay. There's a few people that never tell us who they are, so not getting their points. But anyway. All right. So I thought actually something exciting happened, and I guess I can just tell you, these guys patched their vuln. I've had like 4 vuln reports in the last week, and 2 people actually patched their junk. And one of them is really very relevant to this class, so I guess I'm going to go public now because it's really patched, which is the University of Houston. And this was really quite exciting. University of Houston has an iOS app for alumni, and you can just search for names here, and you'll see the names there. And if you use, try to log in and see more about this person, it asks you for their alumni ID number, which is a secret. That's the password to get you in the database. But it turns out that it uses broken HTTPS, so you can man in the middle of it to watch the network traffic. And when you do, it sends your data up without encrypting it. So here, I'm trying to limit this because there's actually real people's names and addresses in here. So this is what happens when you search. It sends this data to the server. This is kind of awesome Here's the header. Here's what it sends in a post request. Collection name. Notice here, this is the part where you have your name. It sends substring of Houston user first name and substring of last name. So you don't send just the first and last name to the server. You send the SQL command, substring of this and substring of that. So this is command injection on their server. I can just put commands here and they'll execute on a server. This is mind-boggling. You almost never see this. And another thing, which I think I'm not going to show right now because I have to redact it better, is that every time you search for any user, it sends the entire database to your phone, 0.5 MB of stuff, all the passwords, all the phone numbers, all the addresses for everybody, and then it only shows you some of it in the app. This I heard used to be common years ago. I've never seen one live before, or they just send all the data to your phone and only let you see some of it and think that's okay, which it really is not, because there are other ways to see the network traffic. And so when I told them, I found a guy at Houston who does CCDC. He started CCDC, so when I told him, he totally understood, and within 1 day, the server was down, and they patched it. It was very impressive. That's why when I give vulnerability disclosures, I really try to reach a person who does cyber competitions because they know what's going on. If you just send to the normal email address, you get like lawyers and stuff, and they just try to blame you for it and lock you up and not fix it because they can't understand anything about the security consequences. Anybody that does competitions knows everybody's got problems. There's no point pretending you don't. You expect an endless flood of complaints and fixes, and there's no reason to make a federal case out of it. Yeah. If I get this thing to pop up. Would you inject SQL? Yes. You wouldn't even have to inject SQL there. That's what's awesome. You can just type commands there. It's like a command prompt blinking at you. You don't even have to inject it. That's what's awesome. These are very rare. There's a lot of websites with SQL injection, like 11%. Not even 1% do this, where there's actually just SQL you can read and type. That's like I just give you a command prompt logged in as an administrator and say, it's like having a shop where you just put a cardboard box and say, if you take stuff, please put your money in the box. You know, it's totally trusting the user, far more than you should. Anyway, so that's, what is this nonsense? Zoom would like to control this computer. I think I'll deny whatever it's trying to do. I must have hit the wrong button. Anyway, all right, so, or maybe some student is trying to take over my computer as a joke, probably just me hitting the wrong button. Anyway, so let's do a bit of the next one, and then we'll take a break before finishing it. So client-side controls. This is good, clean, fun. I've talked about this for a while, and now we're going to do it. So this is what happens that makes everything so vulnerable. Very often, you have one server, and then it has to pass data to another server, but instead of having a way to move it directly from one server to the other, it sends it to the client and says, send this back up to the server in the next request. So you bounce data off the client that you need, like the price, your identity code, whether you're the administrator or not. This is very common. Now, this might seem stupid. Why would anybody do that? But in fact, it is almost always the easiest way to get anything done, because developers in the first place assume that the user can't modify the data because they think they're just in a browser. And the other thing is, often I am like the database administrator, and I do not have privileges to change the website and privileges to change the authentication module and the shopping module and the business partner that's putting ads on my site. I can't get the password there, so I can't change what they do over there. So just sending it to the user and having it bounce back over there is the only thing I can reasonably do without having to go through a big bureaucratic nightmare. And so very often, this is how it works. And so it's often very much easier to just send it to the user and say, now when you go back to that other server, tell them this will shoot and you'll be fine. So people often put things on fields that they don't expect you to control. Like one thing people commonly do is use hidden fields for this. You can put a form on the page where I can put in a quantity, and you can put in a thing called hidden called price. And then it does not show up in the browser, and you can't change it. So you can do that. And as far as if you're just in the browser clicking, you can't change the price. But of course, it is coming from the server, the client, so you can change it with Burp. So let me just do a few of these live. This is what your next homework is. It's good, clean, fun. So we go to this thing. And if I go to client-side controls demonstrations, here we are. So if I try to buy a phone, I buy one phone and submit. Okay, I buy one phone for $449, but I want to buy it for $50. So to buy the phone for $50, I just have to send this through Burp. Because if I look at the source code here, and I can do it this way, I can inspect this element. And then it will show me I'm here. And if I expand the things near there, there is a hidden field there, which is price. Now, it could be that that field is ignored on the server, and that's what should happen. The only thing you should send to the server is like a product number, and it should look up the price on the server. It should not believe any price that came from you. But like I was just saying, it frequently does because the poor developer doesn't find an easy way to actually move the data from one place to another except to bounce it off of you. So if I could manipulate that hidden field, it might change the price. And the easiest way, of course, is to send it through Burp. So I go to Preferences and Proxy, and I check my proxy. Okay, you send my proxy to 127.0.0.1 on 8080. And now I got to make sure Burp is running, which it is. And if I go here, it's listening, looks pretty good. Here's a bunch of old history. I'm going to clear the history. Okay, and now I'm going to go to my page. Okay, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to buy one phone. Okay, so I failed, but the point is now I got that in Burp. Now the easiest way to play with this is to right-click it and send it to the repeater. Repeater's over here, and here's some old stuff. I'll just delete that. Okay, deleted too many. We go back to here, send to repeater. Okay, so here's the request going up to the server, and I can just run it right here. And when I run it, it gives me this source code, and if it's readable HTML, I'll get a render tag, and I can just display it here. So I can see right there, I bought one phone for $449. Here's my request, and I can see the quantity went and the price went. So I can just change the price to 44 and send that. And now I got a phone for 44, and I guess I was supposed to buy it for 50. So I'll change that to 50. And now I got a phone for 50, purchase complete. So that's the point. This, by the way, happens over and over and over again. There was one like 5 years ago where everybody was getting like free USB drive from Microsoft, and you could just get 10 or 100 free ones. And every time there's an online voting system, all you have to do is go through Tor. So you keep coming from different IP addresses. You can vote over and over and over. So they were making like some kind of Nazi lunatic the Time Man of the Year because they had an online voting, and like the 4chan people got involved to make someone awful be the Man of the Year. Yeah.
Voting for a new flavor.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's just the problem with the web. This is why people say you shouldn't have online voting, because there's many, many problems with the web where the web is really not secure enough for voting. So that's the hidden field one. So let's do a few more. Here you want a discount. So if I click here, I'll get a discount. Now I'll get a discount of 10. So if I buy a phone now, I got a discount of 10, but I want a discount of 100. And as you can imagine, that discount did not really come from the server. That discount came from me. So if I go to the proxy, and there were here's the post that bought something and sent the quantity. All right, and where's the cookie? Here's the cookie. Notice the cookie has a Cloudflare ID, and then it has a number, discount equals 10. So you might try to modify it here, but you can't because the HTTP history tab is history. You can't change it. You have to copy it and send it to the repeater tab. And now I can send it here and see how it looks. That was a discount of 10. Guess I can't zoom in, but that's the way it is. And now I can just change the discount, which is up here, to 100. Now my discount is 100. So same kind of principle, all very much the same, but it was in a cookie, that's all. That's why I had 2 steps to get there. One to set the cookie and one to use the cookie. And there's a URL parameter. So if I buy a phone, I want to get my phone for cheaper. Now, if you look right up in the URL, the price is right there. Quantity equals 1 and price equals $4.49. This is another reason, by the way, why you never put anything important up there. Because if you put it up there, everybody can find it, even people that can't figure out how to use Burp. I can just change it here, of course. That's pretty obvious, and now I'm getting my phone for 50. So that's really making it easy. All right, and here's a referrer. So you can buy this phone, but only if you are an employee coming from apple.com. So I submit, and it says failed. You're not coming from apple.com. But of course, it's the same old story. I'm here. If I send that to the repeater, there is a referrer page telling it that I'm coming from samsclass.info, which is why I'm not allowed to buy the phone. So I just have to make that apple.com instead and send that. And now I can buy a phone because now it believes who I am. This believing the referrer is like believing the from address and email or the caller ID number in a telephone call. That is an unvalidated quantity. You can put anything you want in there. And it is sort of a rookie mistake to believe that the referrer is accurate and base any decision based on what's in the referrer, but it does happen. Then there's a length limit. Yeah.
How are these instances flagged from a security standpoint?
How do you prevent all this?
Well, let's say you have one
Yeah.
someone explodes it and it's just one time.
Yeah.
How would you?
That's a very good question. How would you catch them? I know one answer is sanity checks. Like if they're only allowed to buy one, you'd notice if the same person bought more than one. Another good tool for this is actually Splunk. Splunk lets you go through your log data, like with Google, and you could do a query. Are there two queries to the same address, two successful purchases from the same address or something? The kind of thing you could easily look for in Splunk. But you wouldn't have to go and look for it. That's why I worked at an escrow agency where they gave money to people from lawsuits, and one of the employees of the company went home and told all their neighbors to file bogus claims in many lawsuits. And I went through the database and found this one group of people were getting all this money they weren't entitled to. And the same thing happened to Intuit that has tax refunds. Normal people only file one tax refund per SSN, but there are certain fraudsters that file like hundreds, and you can easily find them if you remember to look for them in the database. Yeah.
Can't a lot of this stuff be checked with server-side checks?
Yes, you could have server-side sanity checks. Your server side should somehow look if something is ridiculously wrong, and that would help. But then attackers just have to be smarter. Like I said, they could go through Tor, and then they would appear to be 100 different people, and it would be tougher to catch that. And yeah, these are good questions.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Using Burp for like pen testing.
Yeah.
There are certain times you'll get like, you have to add an exception, right? And you say, advanced tab and then add exception, like in
Exception?
like the certificate.
Oh, the certificate exception. Okay, right.
But I think it's
Right.
between the client and Burp, it's
Yeah.
HTTP, and then from Burp to the site is HTTPS.
You can do that. That's one option. Yes, there's the certificate. You could put the Burp certificate in your browser, and then your browser will trust Burp and it not bother you anymore. You could also tell Burp to downgrade all connections to HTTP. Like
And a lot of sites will, like if you're doing pen testing, a lot of the sites will complain.
I haven't seen that, but I wouldn't be surprised. That is certainly not a good thing because part of it's going unencrypted, but I'm surprised that they can detect it. But they might.
So it's basically just import the Burp certificate to your browser.
Yes, if you import the Burp certificate into your browser will stop complaining. Some sites that actually implement certificate pinning will not work, but almost nobody does that. That turned out to be so difficult, almost nobody actually used it. It was recommended for a while. What's up with you?
So to grab the certificate, what you have to do is you have to point your web browser at the Burp proxy. So it'd be like
What's going on here?
and then on that page,
In addition,
and then input that into the browser, and you never have to worry about it again.
I guess, I don't know. I don't think I saw that in mine. Burp is pretty legit. It's probably all right. Anyway, all right, good. Well, these are good questions. All right, so let's see. One coming in online. Good. Can Burp man in the middle sites that use HSTS? And it can actually, because HSTS is a header that tells it to make a site secure, and you can remove that header so your browser never sees it. HSTS is strict transport security. If you put this header field in your website, then it tells the browser the first time you go to this website, memorize the certificate. And if ever later it's a different certificate, then bust it. But if I tell Burp to filter that out so your browser never sees it, then it will have no effect. That's why it's kind of got a problem. Yeah.
So what happens when the certificate expires?
Then you have a problem. And that is kind of why all these things sort of went downhill after they recommended them. And I think there is some way to get around it, but it's not easy. That's why certificate pinning and these other technologies were highly recommended, and then they became less popular. I think HSTS does have some way to do it. The browser is what implements HSTS. That's why if you use an old browser, HSTS has no effect. And if you use Burp to filter out those certificate headers, then, and it's the first time you ever went to that site, so that site the browser hasn't seen it previously, then it will not continue to have no effect. These are very good questions, and I should add them to the homework. They're not in your book because HSTS came after your book came out. But anyway, let's see. The problem here is I want to buy 10 phones, This is very similar. But why you guys are, these questions are good because this homework is pretty repetitive. So now if I send this to repeater, you'll see here I'm buying one phone and the quantity of one was not changeable. Because if I look at the source code this came from, which I can find here, oh, the quantity is 1 here. Okay, and I can change the quantity to 9 and buy 9 phones. But if I try to buy 10 phones, it won't let me type the second letter because that field has a length of 1. And you can tell that by highlighting it and inspecting it. And you'll see here that field, there's the form, and there's max length equals 1. You only have enough room to put in 1 digit. So you can't put in 10. But this is something that happens on the client side. So I could get around this a lot of ways. One way I could do it is just save the page locally and edit the source code to put a different number there. Or I could tell Burp to cut the max length tag off on the way to me so I got a page without it. Or I could do this. I could just take the data after the HTML form has made it and then modify it on the way out after I've escaped the browser controls. So that's what I've got here in the repeater. It's sending the quantity equals 1. So if I send this up here, I buy 1 phone. And now I can just change that to 10 here. And now I bought 10 phones. I did not enter 10 into the form field, but it looks like I did. And like I say, it's because the server doesn't independently validate that number. It trusts the client. And that's the fatal mistake that these are all making. Anyway, that's more of the same. And here's script-based validation. The maximum is 5. So if I buy 5, it works. If I try to buy 6, it says quantity too large. It pops up an error. This is JavaScript. And so let's look at the source code of this. I think it'll be in this area. Inspect should get me close to it. And so let's see. Form name action equals post on return validate form. It's going to go run a validate form script somewhere. And the validate form is probably up here somewhere. Let me get rid of this inspect thing, go back to the plain old source code so I can see it. View source code. All right. Where have they hidden the view source code? Tools, web developer, view source. There, page source. There we are. And so validate form should be somewhere. It is validate form. Right there it is. So it finds this quantity with document object model. So it's document forms quantity value. And then if it's greater than 5, pop up a box. So that's what it does. That is the script. So you could just turn off JavaScript in your browser. So JavaScript quits running and that would do it. But of course, the easiest way we're going to do it here is to just give it a number like 5 and then go to Burp. And once again, once we've left the browser, it doesn't matter what JavaScript says. It's not running JavaScript anymore. So I can send this to the repeater. And I can just change the number here to 6. And it will sell me 6 phones. So these are all the same thing. After you've left the browser, all the attempts to control what the user does in the browser are gone. And here's a disabled field, right? I'm buying 1. I want to change the price. I can't change the price. If you look at the HTML here, let's highlight that thing and inspect it. Then you will see that the price is a disabled field. The disabled field is visible on the page, but you can't type in and change it. That's the point. So all I have to do is defeat that disabled field. And of course, the simple way, which is obvious here, is to go to Burp and just change the value after it leaves the browser. That is one answer. There's another one that's kind of more fun. I wanted to go to repeater, must have hit the wrong button. Send to repeater, there we are. And so here it is, quantity is 1, go. And the quantity I'm trying to change here? The price, okay, good. So where's the price? Well, that's right, I have to add the parameter back in. Right, the price is not here, but I could try adding it here. Price equals 50. And then I would have to change the length, I think. So this would be instead of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. This is one way to do it. That should work if I've done it right. Yep, now I bought a phone for 50. And I think there are other ways to do it.
Just in the parameter tab.
Yeah, if you do it in the parameters tab, I think it'll automatically adjust the link. I could add the parameter here. That'd be usually Burp to do even more of the work for you. But again, that's another, now there's another more fun way to get there, is what I wanted to show you, which is if you go to your proxy options, Burp has an automatic way to solve all of these. And that is intercept server responses, response modification. I can unhide hidden form fields and prominently display them and enable fields and remove validation and input field length limits and everything. So now it will show me a version of the page that has all that junk turned off. So this is really good, clean fun. Once you set your Burp this way, now you just go back to this page and refresh it. And suddenly everything is right here for you. There's the price. The cookie discount you still have to do by hand. Here's the hidden field. Here's the length limit is now gone. So I can buy 10. It just took that out. And the script-based validation just won't work. It turned it off, so I can buy 50. And the disabled field is no longer disabled. So that's pretty good, clean fun. You know, that's just like taking the training wheels off, where you can just get at everything.
But how does Burp, when you refresh this page, Burp actually guide the data stream and then?
It's response, you send the request, and the server sends the response, and Burp changes the response going into your browser by removing all these things. So anything that says disabled, it just takes that out. Anything that has an input field length limit, it just takes it out. So Burp modifies the code on the way to you. And this is why they say no page should be using HTTP anymore at all. Because if you're using HTTP, anybody in the middle can do this to you. They can change the page, so what you see is not the real page, but some modified page with additional scripts.
So Burp is actually in the middle.
Yes.
Without you turning on the.
Yes, Burp is like, Burp has to be in the middle. We had to set the proxy right at the start. Burp has to be in the middle to do any of this. So yeah, the intercept is off. All that means is it doesn't block traffic and let you see it. It lets it flow through, but it's still in the middle.
This only applies to HTTP.
You can do it to HTTPS also, but if you do, you'll get an error message saying the certificate is not good. Studies have shown at least a few years ago, 99% of users will just click through that and not know what it means. They might be wising up now. Users are getting more and more savvy about this. Like they did a survey about a week ago and said like 60% of people in the Bay Area want to leave because of housing prices. But if you ask them what their #1 concern is, it's internet privacy, even more than housing prices. People are finally getting really worried about this, which is job security for all of us. Everybody wants more security engineers because they've all figured out how much they're getting hurt by everything the internet's doing to them. And they hope that we can save them. So anyway. So I think we're up to another iClicker. Let me just see. I think we demonstrated all these things, the hidden fields, changing the price. By the way, if Burp irritates you by showing zipped content, you can just turn that off by removing the accept encoding tag here. Some pages will send you a compressed version of the page. So we did all these, all the places you can put it, hidden parameters, refer or header. We've done all of them. Now you might have opaque data, like you might have values like this, just long, complicated junk. This is why many developers feel like it's okay to send data to the client because it comes in some form like this, where it's really hard to modify even if you have Burp. And that might be nice if this was really encrypted in a strong way, but it frequently isn't. So if you know the plain text, you might be able to reduce the algorithm. You might be able to find functions elsewhere that will help you do it, or you can be able to send in unexpected things to the server which confuse it. One big one was ASP. The Microsoft technology had a default ASP.NET view state, it still does, which will automatically send all the data to the client in a long string of blob data. This is a very common issue, a blob of text that includes a lot of information. The original version of view state was not really encrypted or protected, though. It was just sort of compressed in a way that could be unpacked. So the request sent to the user will now have this view state equals this long line of junk. And in that are parameters. And you're expected to send that back to the server at your request. Yeah.
I have a dumb question. So if they use HTTPS, Burp can't do anything to modify the code? Or it's just one
If you
button?
use HTTPS, Burp can't do anything without the user being warned. The user will see a box popping up saying, like there, something's wrong with the certificate. If you can trick the user into clicking yes, then it's over. But if the user actually stops when they see that box, then they're protected, and the only person that can fool them is a nation state or really advanced criminal that can actually forge a certificate for a certificate of authority. And those are typically not forgeable, but you can steal them or bribe them to give them to you or force them to give them to you if you're government. But it puts it out of the reach of most attackers. That's the point. HTTPS protects you from most of the attackers. The only people that can still hurt you are nation states, which are pretty much unstoppable anyway.
So anytime that I see a mismatch with certificate, that means I may be about to be part of a man-in-the-middle attack?
Absolutely. Anytime you see a certificate warning, it could be that someone's doing a man-in-the-middle attack on you. Unfortunately, that is almost never the case, which is why usually what it means is your clock is wrong, or the person at the other end forgot to renew their certificate, or they sold the business and the name changed and they didn't bother to buy a new certificate yet. This is why users have learned that that thing means nothing, just go right past it, which is usually true. But if someone was doing a man-in-the-middle attack, you'd see the same error. This is why there's a problem with security. Most of the time, your security warnings are false positives. And that is unfortunate.
I've seen some more detailed warnings on the latest versions of like Safari and Chrome where it actually says this site appears to be hacked.
Yes, that is because they actually detected like no malware on the site or something. Antiviruses will do that in search engines now.
Okay.
And it can actually be on a blacklist. My site's on blacklists too. It'll warn you not to go to my site because some people flag my homework assignments as malware. But there's errors in every system. Anyway, these are very good questions. So they got this view state value coming down. So when you submit a form, the view state is this long blob of data. Instead of seeing parameters individually, like quantity equals this, price equals that, you have this view state going up. And that would be fine, except the older versions of ASP didn't actually encrypt it. So you could just parse it, and Burp contains a view state parser. So you can just parse it right here. It's not really encrypted or hidden, so you can modify it in Burp anyway. Later versions of ASP have the ability to actually encrypt it and sign it. So it's much harder to do. Anyway, so we talked about the length limit and refreshing a page. If you have there's this e-tag string appears, this is like a version number. So when you actually reload pages, you may see a 304 response saying page is not modified. And so you don't bother reloading the page, just keep looking at the one you've got. That's an issue. If you actually do want to reload the page anyway, you can do shift refresh in your browser to force a real reload. If you're using Cloudflare like I do, you have to keep turning off Cloudflare, or Cloudflare will cache it too, and people will not see the latest version. It's true of all proxies. Is view state has the same function as a cookie? Yes. The only difference between view state and a cookie is view state is like a cookie, but it has obfuscated the content. So it is more difficult for someone to modify it. They can't even see the names of the parameters or anything. So it's a sort of more secure cookie. That's essentially what it is. Good. Remember, I thought we'd make it up to the eye clickers. I think we can make it. I don't know. So then there's script-based validation we talked about. You run the script, it validates the page, but you can just change the page after the browser in Burp, or you can go to that setting in Burp and turn off all JavaScript anyway. So there's lots of ways to check this. You should test all the cases because the scripting might be sloppy and they might not really test all the variables. And so client-side validation is not totally evil. It has a purpose. You have to understand the purpose of it is to avoid wasting everybody's time. Like if you're filling in an address, make sure that the zip code has 5 digits. Don't even bother sending it to the server. If it doesn't, just pop a box and tell the user to fix it. That is faster response for the user and less wasting time on your server, but you can't trust it. When the data gets to the server, you can't assume that the zip code will only have 5 digits because you put it in client-side validation. You have to test it again, which sounds like a lot of wasted work, but it's not. You test it on the client to improve the user's experience, and you test it on the server to make sure they're not hacking you. They're different jobs, and you do have reasons to have both tests. But you can't do just one of these tests and feel like the job is done. And if you talked about disabled elements, And how to add a parameter in Burp, you can do it here, or you can do it the way I did it by just typing it right in the raw request. And we mentioned response modification. Burp has the ability to automatically turn off all the common features that sloppy developers use to protect them, so you can just sail right past them. And that makes the whole thing very easy to hack. Makes the homework trivially easy if you do it that way. So that's what I thought. We've already been through this, so we might as well do the cahoots and then take a bit of a break. So this is 7A. All right. Yes. Oh, I'm going through Burp, aren't I? I'm going through Burp. Burp is following everything up. Let me bypass Burp. Preferences, proxy. This is why it's good to have two browsers, but the problem is Firefox is the only browser I know that will let me change the proxy settings without changing it for the whole machine on the Mac right now. I should find another browser that has that property, like, yeah.
There's a plugin called Proxy.
Yeah.
And it's just, you know,
Yeah, I should try that. I tried it years ago and I didn't like it, but I like it better now, yeah. Proxy. That's right. Just let me choose the proxy server on the list. What's that?
The class be 129?
Yeah, I'm on the wrong class. I don't know. I might be in the wrong class. That's a good question. Let's see. Oh, yeah, I am in the wrong class. Why, thank you. That would be annoying. I've done that a few times. Actually played the wrong cahoots. Then everybody gets them wrong and I wonder why. So, all right. This might be better. Good, thank you. Sometimes I get halfway through them before I figure out what's wrong. Because I remember all these classes. They all run together in my mind. All right. You're right, I should try Foxy again. I used to use the brutal technique of just having several different browsers, but now all the browsers are kind of synchronizing on one engine, so that isn't working anymore. All right. Looks like people are pretty much ready. I'll give it 5 more seconds. All right. So, why do web apps keep sending data to the user and then expecting to trust it when it comes back? What is their problem? All right, that's the problem. There are many servers, and it's the easiest way to get data from one server to the next. So which one of these is easy for the end user to modify without using Burp? Okay, the data right in the URL parameter is one thing you don't need Burp for. By the way, there are plenty of other proxies. Some people, developers tend to use the Charles proxy, and Microsoft people use Fiddler. They all do the same thing. Burp is the main thing attackers use. Anyway, so what do you do to make an HTTP request readable and Burp repeater? Should be an HTTP response there. I'm missing the word. Yeah, you got to do that. Otherwise, it might send it to you zipped or otherwise difficult to read. All right. How do you completely reload a page in Firefox? Yes, shift refresh. All right, good. So, all right. All right. So like Caitlin, I got again. And A. Levy looks like a real name. And Win will have to tell me who they are. That does not look like a real name. But anyway, all right. So we ought to take a break. It's what, 7:16. Let's take a break till 7:25. Give you a 10-minute break. I'm going to pause the recording, although leave the share going.
Most of these corporations will promise something like 25,000 jobs. In reality, they'll create something like 1,300.
Oh, yeah.
And in the meantime, you gave them billions of substitutes so that they can sell.
That
Just
is,
like they don't live in Europe. Europe's going to do several thousand jobs because all the car companies are moving out of there.
well, that's what,
I heard.
well, that's what,
Brexit.
No, they're moving out of England. They're
That's
not
what
moving
I
out of-
like, yeah.
well, that's because of Brexit. But anyway, that's what AOC says. She said it was good that we got out of the Amazon deal in New York. It was bad for New York. Anyway, so then there's browser extensions. These things are, thank God, less popular now. It used to be everybody had to have Flash and Java in their browser, and these things were just wide open doors to take over your machine. And they never seemed to patch them well enough. They got more and more ridiculous. And now pretty much people don't bother with them anymore, thanks to Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs caused this because he refused to support Flash on the iPhone. He said, I'm not putting this garbage on my phone. It's going to just drain the battery and cause all these security problems and just forget it. And so everybody couldn't see Flash-based pages in their iPhones. So everybody had to quit using Flash, which was really a security benefit to the world. So that's the game. You could totally play with things. You could modify the Flash code. So anybody that ran in Flash, you could pretty easily find parameters and mess with it.
What replaced it though?
HTML5 is the main replacement I know of. And so Java, Flash, and Silverlight were all used to make these animated things, and they relied on third-party browser extensions that were just notoriously insecure. And until like 5 years ago, everybody had these in every browser, and now they very rarely are used anymore. Java is still used, not the client-side Java in a browser, but Java on the server to run things like Apache Tomcat in server clusters to serve lots amount of pages. That happens. But in the Java virtual machine on your client, this is not so common. What is, however, common is the Dalvik virtual machine on Android. Everything in Android is written in Java and running in a local machine, but it's very different than the browser extension. And although there are huge security problems in Android, they're not really caused directly by failures in the Java virtual machine. They're caused mainly by the fact that you can still see the source code. Anyway, Flash runs in a Flash virtual machine the same kind of way, running in this language called ActionScript. It's pretty much just of historical interest. Flash has pretty much gone the way of the dodo bird. Microsoft wanted to compete with Flash about 10 years ago, so they invented Silverlight and trumpeted it and tried to get everyone to write this, and everybody laughed like they do at most things Microsoft comes up with. Nobody ever. It wasn't any better than Flash. It was like a Windows Phone. It was like, here, we have our version that does exactly what the other one does, except not quite as good. And everyone says, why should we care? And they say, you should care. You should really care. Oh, gee, nobody cares. And then they give up. It's like Microsoft is like a movie studio that has 3 flops and a hit, 3 flops and a hit. You know, they have a hits like Windows 7 made them a ton of money, and then they have three flops and then another big hit. So Silverlight was one of their monumental flops. Yeah.
So I remember Jobs banned Flash.
Yeah.
Obviously, he didn't adopt Silverlight. And
No.
what he said,
Nobody
HTML5
adopted
will take care of
Yes, that's right. And that turned out to be true. Yeah. He said, this is all garbage. We're going to the next thing. That's always the way it is. This is why my Mac has all these dongles, because he got rid of USB and got the latest USB-C. He always thought you should just have the latest, best, and abandon all the old stuff that's junky. That was the whole philosophy of Apple.
I mean, that's what Dell's doing. Dell adopted USB-C.
Yeah, well, that's right. And usually Steve Jobs, by the way, is right of what the next thing is. It's just there's the irritating transition period when you're trying to connect to the old stuff. But after a few years, you all just do that. Like I remember he sold the Mac with no floppy drive. But once in a while in Candy, he said everything must be on the internet anyway. At that time, the internet connection wasn't good enough, but within a few years, that was actually true. Nobody uses a floppy drive anymore. Everything just goes right up to the internet. Anyway, there's a thing called Java serialization, which is really quite important. And this is a lot like the ASP view state. This is used a lot on the web. So if you have a Java server, it will send data to you in a serialized form. And there's a ton of exploits on the serialized form. So there's a thing called de-esser. You get this thing called a binary state, this long unprintable binary junk, and you can then take it apart with the deserializer, which will take it apart. Just like the ASP view state, Java has this blob of data which contains information. Flash had serialization also. Yeah. What's that?
The previous line.
Yeah.
You have to enter those fields in there to how do you
No, the server sent you some data, and it just came as this unreadable blob. And when you unpack it with this tool, you can see it.
But at the top there, you say enter guest data, so you input them.
Yeah, I guess that's when you're going to send data. Yeah, I guess you're right. I forget how this thing works. I think you can use it to read data, and you can also use it to modify data. Yeah. Anyway, Burp had Flash had the same thing, and you could put in a Flash unpacker option that would do it. Silverlight had the same thing, of course, and there was a way it was packed in these blobbed form, and you could take it apart. So there were lots of tricks to get in there, which I think are not worth worrying about too much. But anyway, so here's something that can happen. Some clients actually use non-HTTP protocols. Now that's really annoying. And if that happens, of course, Burp is kind of lost, and you'll have to use other tools to get in there. You could just look at it in Wireshark. Yeah.
The point about the serializer is
Yeah.
you can serialize it, change the parameters, serialize it again.
Right.
And
Exactly. And the reason, like many of these weak encryption techniques, the fact that they made it a blob causes the developer to think, well, the client can't change that.
Okay.
But a few of them, like the modern ASP, actually has a digital signature on it, which you can't forge. So the client really can't change it. But these earlier ones didn't really have a signature. It was just difficult to change. All somebody had to do was write an extension. That's the problem. They didn't really do something like encrypt it with a key you don't have that would really stop you from changing it, which is what they ought to do. Anyway, so that's the game here. You can look for data that's handled improperly. There's serialization unpackers. And all right, if there's anything else worth mentioning here, you can look for things that have client-side logic errors. Anyway, let's take a look at the last cahoots here. And there's a couple of slides after the cahoot, but I'm not planning to go through them in a lot of detail because it gets sort of tedious. 5B. All right.
I'm good. A 6-digit number.
That seems to be the most common length. I've seen 5 and 7, but 6 seems to be usually it.
It's much of a bigger than 58,000. What's the
Hard to know. I guess I'll wait a few more seconds. Okay.
I found the difference between Samsung phone, the phone for Samsung and iPhone.
There's a huge difference. One's Android and one's iOS.
No Wi-Fi difference.
I put Wi-Fi.
You can do some hacking with one and you can't see it with the other.
You ready? Okay, good. All right, well, let's give it a shot. Okay. All right, so which of these is not compiled to bytecode? Okay, HTML is just passed to the browser and rendered. The rest of these are all half digested, compiled down to bytecode, which is platform independent, and then run in a virtual machine on the client. And that's why you could write a website in Flash and people could see it on all different platforms. Anyway, all right. Which one was killed by Apple? Okay, we talked about that, Flash. All right, which one is promoted by Microsoft, but it failed anyway? Surprise, surprise. Sprite. All right, how can you force all client components to allow Burp to intercept HTTPS traffic? This is the technique we used here. If you put it in the OS trusted store, then all the networking components will now trust that. If you were to just add an exception in Firefox, it might not apply to the extensions, although not that many people are using these extensions anymore. All right, so We got Caitlin again. Mateo, I think that's a real name. And Peter D, that looks like a real name. So the only person getting ripped off is Win. They don't ever tell me the real name, they aren't going to get their points. All right. And there's a few more slides I just want to mention. I don't think I want to bother putting them the next time. We're just going to talk about, so you can decompile the browser extensions themselves if you want to. Get the source code for that. That would be one way to go. You can get the bytecode for something like applets and modify them, but this I think is kind of out of date, so I don't want to struggle with it very much. Java applets, we're doing a lot in the Android class, and you see it there. We're decomposing them into Smalley and packing the Smalley, and there it's useful. That part I understand. Java in the browser is probably not that important anymore for web browsers, but it's very important for Android apps, and that's where we're doing it. And we're using JAD, and JADX is one of the many tools that takes downloaded Java applets and turns them back into Java so you can read them and see how they work. And there are similar things for Flash and Silverlight, but who cares? Use this Java jar APK tool to take apart the Bank of America app, one of the homeworks in the other class. Then you can see how the Bank of America app works. It's just got all these readable things like business credit card details, activity. You can just read the code here. It's got username and password just sitting right there. So you can just add codes that takes the username and password and send it off so you can steal them. Recompile it, sign it again, and make a fake Bank of America card app that looks perfectly fine and steal the username and password. And I told them about this 5 years ago, and they just don't care. It is a sin and a shame, but that's the way it is. So it makes good homework. All right. So someday they will be motivated to care, but that hasn't happened yet. Yeah.
Vice did a special. They went to Oakland, and there's a guy that was hacking and using the dark web, and he had a little machine, and he just took a blank card and punched new credit cards and went out and bought stuff.
Oh yeah, you could totally do that. You can just buy a thing and put it and make your credit cards. You can even do it with your phone and everything. Yeah, for the old tax. Now the chip cards are harder to forge. That's why that was the big step when we finally went up to the chip cards. With magnetic stripe cards have been a sin and a shame, almost like the ones with rubber chunk, where anybody can trivially duplicate them. They're not, what?
Making your own credit card, like copying someone's?
I don't think it's illegal to make a credit card, but it's illegal to take somebody else's money. Absolutely. But I think making the card itself is not a crime.
But they covered their faces.
Yeah. Anyway, so here's, you can look at the client side source code. We talked about this, hidden functionality like hidden fields you can often unlock. And you can do this, of course, for all these other things like Java and Silverlight, but it's the same principle, but it's not worth studying details of it because it's not that common. Burp even has the ability to paste in a blob of binary data that you created with another app. You can paste in from a file. So you could have a third-party thing compiling your extension and put it back in. But, you know, that's a bit extreme, and we aren't going to go that far in this class. We're doing essentially that in the Android class with other tools that make it easier. And, all right. Anyway, there's obfuscation methods, which we talk about in the Android class, where you try to change the name of all the methods and variables to something less obvious. There are commercial tools that do this for Android, like Dash-O, and people should use them. Like the Bank of, that's why I told the Bank of America, you should just use this commercial tool to hide your source code, but they just don't care. Anyway, so there's other ways to make your code more convoluted when you compile it, so it's harder for reverse engineers. All these things are available, but many people just don't bother using them. And all right, that's the game here. There's a shopping Java applet that creates something called obpad with this long, ridiculous value. And you can make it so that things are hard to read like that and hard to modify. And it's not really relevant for this class directly in the browser extension. It's more relevant for the Android class, where you can improve the source code of your Android apps to where it's very hard for people to reverse engineer it. But for some reason, it's not common for anyone to bother doing this. And that's why I thought we'd go through, pretty much skip over this stuff because it's not, we'll do it in the other class more than this. There were ways to do it in browser extensions, but they've pretty much gone away these days. All right. And if, I don't think any of the rest of that really matters. We can skip over it. So you've got some homework to do, and I've shown you how to do the next one. Yeah, are there any questions coming out? Well, now I'm going to stop the share and go upstairs and see if anybody wants help here. And that's it for today. Okay. Looks like nothing's coming in. All right.
But US Bank and Bank of the West, they're more secure, right? They get their stuff or no?
No. The only
There's still-
one